under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Hey, what's going on, guys? I hope you guys are enjoying your Thursday evening. More importantly, I hope you guys have had a productive work week. I know for a fact that I have, man, but we are getting in now to the weekend. And of course, Stateside Footy is back like we are every single weekend. Tonight, obviously, we're talking about the U.S. men's national team and, of course, some of the transfer moves that have been made, moves that need to happen. For Mauricio Pochettino, man, this was actually a big summer transfer window on top of the Gold Cup that we played in. Some of the players that I think we could assume might be on the World Cup team. Some of those guys made impressive moves this summer. And so we're going to get into it. Not only the players that have made moves, but also players that should make moves before the summer transfer window closes shut. All right. Before we get into it, man, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons because, again, we are in a race for 1,000 subs. So do yourselves a favor, man. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Help a brother out. All right. So let's get into it because, again, man, the U.S. men's national team had some very big moves that happened this summer. And there's also some players that probably should move. And again, for those that are unaware, the MLS summer transfer window will shut tight on August 21st. So that is 2 weeks away. Yeah, exactly. 2 weeks away from now. So for those that are stateside that are thinking about making the jump to Europe, not a lot of time is left on that. And of course, we'll get into specific names. Some have already left. So let's go ahead and get into it and let's get busy with some of the names that have already made the move. And we're going to start off with center defensive mid Johnny Cardoso. There was a lot of talk about whether Johnny was going to end up with the Tottenham Hotspur. Apparently, they had negotiated a first right of refusal. They had essentially tried from the winter transfer window to convince him. And of course, they thought that winning the Europa League and being in the Champions League would give them maybe a step in the right direction. But Johnny Cardoso said, no, I want to stay in Spain. And I think that was the right move because not only did he go from Real Betis, he now moves to Atletico Madrid, a bigger club, bigger expectations. And yeah, granted, it's going to be the same league. But when you look at his performances last season, I believe it was across 46 total competitions last year. 46 matches across all competitions. And he actually had what I would consider a breakout season that put him on the map. Not only did Johnny impress with Real Betis, but that being said, he put his name essentially in the shop window to the point where you actually had a few teams actually chase him. And again, we mentioned Tottenham Hotspur, but he lands with Atletico Madrid. And now all of a sudden, You have a U.S. center defensive mid that is playing for one of the big three in Spain, and that is absolutely a huge step. Now, unfortunately for Johnny, he didn't have himself a good go in the Gold Cup. As a matter of fact, didn't necessarily go his way. A lot of people just assumed that maybe he was trying to avoid injury, so he wasn't necessarily trying to go 100%. I highly doubt that whatsoever. But that being said, these are the moves that you want to see some key players make ahead a year out from a World Cup, and now all of a sudden it comes higher expectations. So on one hand, yes, Johnny did himself a favor at Real Betis this season by putting himself out there, by actually showing that he could be a productive member, and not only just a productive squad player, but also a potential starter. And now he's going to go to Atletico Madrid, looking for an opportunity to break into that starting lineup. If Johnny can actually do that, by the way, if Johnny can put himself in a position where, maybe he doesn't necessarily start the season starting, but he's going to play a significant role, that's all he needs, because all he had, it was essentially a similar situation with Real Betis. And as the season progressed, he was given more opportunities until he became a starter. And that's probably what's going to happen at Atletico Madrid. Especially under Diego Simeone and the way that he likes to use his midfield pieces. He doesn't necessarily like to have his center defensive mids, drift a little forward. So he's going to stay in essentially in a compact midfield right in front of the center backs. And this is going to allow Johnny to not only work on his footwork, but also his passing ability. But again, the opportunity is massive for Johnny with Atletico Madrid. So there's that. Moving on to another name that I really wanted to talk about tonight, and that is Malik Tillman. And of course, this news broke during the Gold Cup, and it was Malik Tillman is getting a massive move ahead of this upcoming season, ahead of this World Cup, going from the Dutch Eredivisie to the German Bundesliga, and of course, he's moving to Bayer Leverkusen. And again, just like Johnny Cardoso, Malik Tillman had just an unbelievable season with PSV Eindhoven last season. He did suffer an injury in January that sidelined him for 2 months, but he still finished with 16 goals and 5 assists. For the German, he's German-born U.S. international. He's heading back, essentially back to the Bundesliga, where he was a Bayern Munich academy product. And now he's going to, Leverkusen. And of course, Leverkusen was able, to reach heights under, Xabi Alonso. He's out. He goes to Real Madrid, and now Erik ten Hag steps back in to right the ship there for Leverkusen. And now he made Malik Tillman his top priority of the summer. They get that deal done, and now this is what I like to call like the perfect scenario for a player that had a breakout Gold Cup, right? Generally speaking, he's kind of a quiet guy, but that being said, he actually was one of the focal pieces of the Gold Cup. And if you ask me personally, I think that he kind of cemented himself potentially as a starter on that World Cup roster. And what I mean by that is you look at the leadership that he was able to put on the pitch this summer, and you look at the quiet confidence in which he went about his business. These are the type of traits that he's going to bring to Bayer Leverkusen on top of the goal production, right? And this is exactly what you want, right? And make no mistake, this has nothing to do with Major League Soccer. And I hate to say this, right? For outfield players, Major League Soccer is not the league that you want to be in to prepare for a World Cup. You have to be in a league that is going to challenge you. You have to be ready for the competition in which you're going to face in a World Cup. And Malik Tillman did the right thing by going into a league that me personally think that is the perfect fit for him. He's going to a team that's a massive club in the Bundesliga. It's a team that has European that has Champions League aspirations, and so from that standpoint, he's going to get a lot of run out. And I also think that he's going to be ready for this to a point where I would probably assume on day one he's going to jump into the starting 11. Obviously, because when you make that type of statement, you pay the price that they paid. Obviously, he's going to be there. So from that standpoint, this is absolutely massive, and this is exactly what the U.S. men's national team need is an absolute definite at the 10 position. Because I think we can all agree that when at full strength and the way that Pochettino likes to play, which is having your left side essentially being manned by a wing back, which is going to be Anthony Robinson. And Christian Pulisic is going to float inside and almost play that left-sided 10. Malik Tillman will probably be there on the right as well, too, as Pochettino likes to attack with 2 high 10s. So from that standpoint, it's nice to know that on one side you have a guy who's playing high-level football for AC Milan and Serie A, and you have the other guy who is starting for Bayer Leverkusen a year ahead, essentially of the World Cup, from the standpoint that he's going to have massive goal opportunities in this attack. He's going to have the ability to facilitate and pull the strings. And so from that standpoint, he's going to put himself in such a massive position as far as goal contributions and form heading into the, obviously knock on wood that he stays healthy, but you get what I'm saying. He's going to be putting himself in a massive position come 2026. And again, I think this is actually a brilliant move. And I think it's the right move for Malik. And I like the fact that he was able to be aggressive. I like the fact that he was able to be ambitious with this and understand exactly what he was going to need to prepare for the World Cup in 2026 by moving from the Eredivisie to Bayer Leverkusen. So from that standpoint, Malik Tillman gets nothing but respect for me. Moving on down the list. And we're going to come to Damian Downs, right? So it's the first of a couple strikers that we have to talk about. And Damian Downs, last season, he had an 11-goal season with FC Köln in the second Bundesliga, and he helped them get promotion to the Bundesliga. And then he takes off to Southampton, a team that just got relegated from the Premier League, who are now in the championship. And people are wondering, this has to be a step down. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And I'm going to explain myself specifically because, number one, FC Köln is probably going to be relegated, right? Now, granted, it's still the Bundesliga, right? But that being said, your FC Köln is going to be in a position where they're going to be at the bottom half of the table, essentially in the Bundesliga. They're probably going to get steamrolled quite a bit. And the question is whether or not Damian Downs is ready to handle that responsibility. It's a very good question, and I don't necessarily think that he is. And that's not a slight against him. Because quite honestly, he's only 21 years old. He's only 21 years old, and he actually is facing an uphill battle to make the 2026 World Cup. And I think this is strategic because when you look at Southampton, yes, they just got relegated back to the championship. But that being said, they're still one of the favorites to get moved back up to the Premier League, right? So this is a strategic move on his part. Yes, he understands that for this season, if he stayed, he would have been in the Bundesliga. And yes, that is a good preparation. But that being said, if he's on a team that's going to be that's going to be featuring in the bottom half of the table, that is absolutely going to get punked every single time they step on the pitch, right? There's a good chance that he's not going to necessarily have the goal contributions that are going to reflect being selected on the World Cup roster. So he makes the move to Southampton, puts himself in actually a very competitive league in the championship, and he's going to be able to put himself in a better position at the end of the season when it comes to goal contributions. So when they're thinking about strikers for the 2026 World Cup, this is actually a brilliant move in my mind. Because that being said, there's a good possibility that Damian could be in that 15 to 20 goal tally this upcoming season and help them get promoted back to the Premier League. And then after the World Cup, he's going to be in the Premier League, right? That's actually quite a strategic move. But also, if he's able to stay healthy, if he's able to score goals, right, Damian Downs is going to be able to put himself in the conversation, right? And I think this is actually a strategic move. Instead of dwelling at the bottom of the Bundesliga, not necessarily having the goal contributions because maybe the level just might be a little bit too much for him. Again, he's 21 years old. You go to the championship, and you're going to be playing. The competition is going to be within that age bracket, that 18 to 22 year age bracket. And from that standpoint, you can understand, right? Because, Josh Sargent at 24, 25 absolutely destroyed the championship. And from that standpoint, he's trying to bank on a move higher. But that being said, this is the perfect environment for him to not only put himself in a better position to make the World Cup roster, but also put himself in a position to be in the Premier League at the end of next season as well, too. So me personally, I think Damian Downs did a very good job with this one. Very strategic. It's like moving pieces on a chessboard. I think this actually is going to end up being better for him than staying in the Bundesliga, where it might be just a little, a step, just a little bit too much for him. Moving on to Patrick Aubameyang. And he has moved from Charlotte FC to the championship with Derby County. For his totals with Charlotte FC, I think he's got 72 appearances, 22 goals, including 6 this season. And of course, he's had a pretty solid 2025 with the U.S. men's national team. Again, with the national team, it's not exactly against the top talent in CONCACAF. But that being said, his numbers are what they are. And now he's figuring that since he's been getting a run out now, under Mauricio Pochettino, that now this is an opportunity to put himself in a position to make the World Cup roster. And I actually like it. That being said, I don't think he's going to do it because, again, it all depends on how Josh Sargent's going to play this one out. But that being said, taking a chance and betting on himself and putting himself in a league where American strikers have actually had success in this league. Going to a team that is, kind of mid at best. But that being said, I do like the move for him, right? Because, in Major League Soccer, and you have to understand this about Major League Soccer, it's a league that does not prioritize defense, right? Because of the DPs, the DP rules, and because of the salary cap and some of these other roster mechanisms, and of course the parity, teams generally sink most of their resources in the attack. There's a reason why, the average game in Major League Soccer is like 3-1, 4-1, and that's exactly the reason why they do it. They want it to be a little bit more exciting because American fans generally don't tune into soccer when you're watching a 0-0 match, right? So they want goals and they want these certain things. And so when it comes to player development, the defense usually is about player development versus the attacking side of the ball. And so for that, most attacks generally have the advantage, right? So for Major League Soccer standpoint, again, this is not the league that you want to be in a year out of the World Cup, especially if you're kind of on the bubble, because it's not going to prepare you. It's just not, right? You're not going to be facing remotely the same level of competition as you will in the World Cup, right? So from Patrick's standpoint, he has to make the move to a league that is going to give him at least an opportunity to compete for a roster spot for that World Cup. And so he goes to Derby County. And I think it's the right move. He's going to be the number one target man for Derby County. And so this is going to be a real challenge for him. You wonder whether or not he's going to be able to handle the championship, right? It's a physical league. Again, it's going to be night and day than anything that he's going to face in Major League Soccer. And so from that standpoint, again, he's kind of sitting at number 4 right now on the depth chart, right? He's kind of that hybrid 3-4, and everything is waiting on to figure out exactly how Josh Sargent's going to play this. And of course, we'll get into Josh in just a second. But that being said, he's going to get a lot of run with Derby County. And again, just exactly why I think Damian Downs made the right decision. I think that Patrick Aubameyang made the right decision as well too. I think both are capable of competing it. Obviously they're two different types of strikers. One's a little bit more versatile with speed, while the other one's more like a physical hold-up type of player, which is Aubameyang. So he's going to be in a league where he's going to be able to work on some of the things that he has to improve on. But who knows how this is going to play out. I wish him the best of luck in the 2025-2026 season. But I do believe that he's still going to get called in as well too. from that standpoint. So we'll see how this one plays out. I think both have made the right decisions. And now let's get into some goalkeeper talk right now, because Matt Turner is back in Major League Soccer. He's back with the team where everything started, back with the New England Revolution. He is on a DP contract for the remainder of the season because this is a loan from Olympique Lyon. And again, this was a just an embarrassing situation for Matt Turner, as he had lined up a deal from Nottingham Forest to Olympique Lyon. And of course, the fallout of the John Textor business, the guys that took over Olympique Lyon essentially looked at Matt Turner and said, no, he's not worth $8 million. And, they couldn't break the contract. And it was, it was just an embarrassing turn of face for Matt Turner. Not only was he not good enough to be a starter, they're not going to pay him $8 million to be a backup. And so, when a team says you're not good enough, a team like Olympique Lyon, even if they do have to play in the French league, the reality is that they loaned them back to the New England Revolution, and it's a little embarrassing for him. I'll just if you're a player and that new team that you were hoping to make an impact says that you're not even good enough for them. And they send you back to Major League Soccer, man, that has to be tough, because at least with Matt Turner being in Europe, at least there was some mystery behind it, right? When he was at Arsenal, when he was at Nottingham Forest, even Crystal Palace, there was still some intrigue that when he stepped on the field, something might come from it. And with him being based in Europe, you would think that there would be somebody out there that would take a flyer on him, because he was going to be an inexpensive option, but that didn't materialize. And now the realization is that every single goalkeeper option is now in Major League Soccer, and that's actually okay. I'll give you the reason why I think that's okay, right? Where Major League Soccer is detrimental for outfield players, because again, the level of talent is just nowhere near. It's nowhere near going to get you ready for the World Cup. Goalkeepers are different. Goalkeepers are the position where they have to play, right? Sharpness, focus, all of that comes. And in a league like Major League Soccer, where the attack is paramount versus defense, there's still some solid defenses out there. But that being said, you're going to see a lot of shots. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for Matt Turner to sharpen his skills and put himself in a position to reclaim the number one. I actually think this was the best. This is the best thing that actually happened to him, because at least he's going to play, and now he's going to be able to compete for that number one spot over a guy like Matt Freese, who's in New York, NYCFC. Home dude in Columbus. But that being said, it's like, when you look at the rest of the goalkeeping options, right? Diego Cochin, who's in the fourth division of Spanish soccer, that's not going to cut it, right? He's also 19 years old. He's not going to be starting. Then again, you look at Gaga Slonina, who was, going into the 2022 World Cup, was touted to be, that big hot prospect. He's kind of stalled out a little bit. A couple loans that didn't necessarily go all that well. He's still with Chelsea. He's still a part of that loan army, and who knows exactly where he's going to end up this season. And by the way, if he stays at Chelsea, ends up being like the third or fourth option, that would be absolutely disastrous for him as well too. He needs to get situated with a good loan move. But for guys like Matt Turner, guys like Chris Brady, Patrick Schulte, Matt Freese, the fact that they're all in the same league and they're going to be competing against each other, I think this is actually going to end up being, the best turnabout for this position. Now, granted, this is the worst goalkeeping group that we've had ever. Because we've always had one or two guys that were always overseas, whether it was Casey Keller, Brad Friedel, Tim Howard, Tony Meola. Although Tony didn't go overseas, but you get what I'm saying, right? So we've always had goalkeeping options. You can even throw Brad Guzan in that mix for a little bit. But the reality is, it's like this right now is the worst period for U.S. goalkeepers. But that being said, them being in the same league is probably going to help more than it's going to hurt. And again, it's in a league where you're going to see a lot of shots and you're going to be able to refine your skills and get yourself in a position where Matt Turner can reclaim the number one spot. So we'll see how that plays out. And, that being said, if he can reclaim some of the things that made him the number one in 2022, it's only going to make a guy like Matt Freese even better, right? I think that's the hope, right? That both of those guys would be able to push themselves, and that has carryover when it comes to the U.S. men's national team camp. So we'll see how that plays out. I want to get into really quick a couple of guys that need to make a move. And again, because we're like 3.5 weeks until the window shuts. And I want to begin with Josh Sargent, who looked like he was going to make a move back to the Bundesliga with Wolfsburg. And then, of course, the player, Josh turned it down, saying that he wants to remain in England. The reality is, I don't know who's his advisor. I don't get it. And the reason why I don't get it is this is exactly the type of move you want to make. And understand that Josh has kind of fumbled it a little bit. Now, of course, I'm a Josh Sargent fan, and I think he's actually a terrific player. But he hasn't scored a goal for the U.S. men's national team since 2019. So it's been a while. And he also missed the Gold Cup this summer, which was an absolutely devastating move. I understand why he didn't want to do it. I totally understand. But that being said, for a guy who has been given multiple chances, he needed a run where he scored a couple goals and kind of get everything back on track just to kind of set himself apart a little bit. Because Patrick Agyemang, whether you agree to this or not, yes, the competition wasn't that great, but he still was able, to produce some goals with the national team, right? And that was the thing. It's like he took advantage of what was given to him, and you can't knock it. Josh had the opportunity this summer to be at the Gold Cup, to kind of right some wrongs and put himself in a position where he kind of stood out a little bit, put him in a position where he can show Poch that yes, he can be trusted to score goals when he's called upon. And had he actually accepted the deal to Wolfsburg and put himself in the Bundesliga a year ahead. Now again, Wolfsburg isn't Leverkusen, I understand, but they're still a top 10 team in the Bundesliga. That's important because that means they're a competitive team, and with a competitive team comes expectations, and this is something that demand actually brings out the best of players because that means they have to earn it. And I think Josh is cut from the right kind of cloth where he would be willing to do that, but he turned it down. And again, it just doesn't make any sense in my mind. Saying that he wants to stay in England, if that he gets the move to Burnley in the Premier League because he thinks he's ready for that, I would agree. But he has no problem going back to Norwich, which, by the way, he signed through 2028. And yes, he has proven without a doubt that he could be successful in the championship, 100%. We know that, right? I think he's proven that even with injuries in the last couple seasons, he has definitely proven that he can put the ball in the back of the net in the championship. I don't think that is irrefutable. But with his spot up for grabs in 2026, the way that Malik conducted himself, not only by showing up to the Gold Cup when he didn't have to, but putting himself on the map, getting the move, challenging himself. This is the exact same thing Josh had to do, and it sucks. I hate to say this, right? Because there is a U.S. bias in Europe. And I think he looked at the roster and wondered exactly how he was going to get on the field, right? But that being said, it's like, he's not an established player in Europe. Let's keep it real, right? He was already in the Bundesliga, and he had to go to the championship just to get back to his natural position. And now he thinks that, I don't know what he's thinking, but now he thinks that he should be able to step into a starting lineup right now. And I don't necessarily think it works that way, man. And I think the transfer fee kind of reflected that, right? I think he was, I think he took a look at the roster and said, there's a couple guys ahead of me on this list, and I don't necessarily know if I'm going to regularly see the field because there's no European play. At least in the championship, he's going to be starting. So at the very least, he can go head to head with Patrick Aubameyang at in Derby County and Damian Downs at Southampton, right? So at least the competition is right in front of him, at least for the roster spot, and he's got a track record. But I really think that he's holding out hope that he's going to end up with Burnley, even if it means that there's going to be a potential that he's going to get relegated a year from now. But he wants to try it, right? Because he feels like if he's in the Premier League, then at the very least, even if they get relegated, if he goes there and he feels like he can add something to the team, score goals at that level, that's going to be the type of workload that's going to prepare him for the World Cup. I can understand it, but he's also taking a gamble because I think he probably would have gotten Germany as well too. So from that standpoint, it's a gamble because if that doesn't happen, if that doesn't materialize for him, he's going to be back in the championship. And I don't know if it plays out well for him. I really don't. I really wish that, the people that are talking to him had the foresight to sit him down and say, hey, listen, like this is probably because at the very least, you're not going to get relegated with Wolfsburg. So you're going to be in the Bundesliga, right? And you're going to continue to at least compete for a starting spot, right? This is exactly what you want ahead of the World Cup. But I think he looked at it and said, listen, man, I don't think there's going to be enough playing time for me to actually do what I do. So he's taking a gamble, man. He's taking a gamble. But that's, on the one hand, you can appreciate it, right? Because he's gambling on himself. So there's that. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about Diego Luna. Of course, the center attacker from Real Salt Lake. Interesting that Celta Vigo of La Liga, the Spanish First Division, Spanish top flight, was at the Gold Cup to watch Luca de la Torre, who is still their property. Obviously, Luca is on loan with San Diego FC. And, so they went to the Gold Cup to see if, Luca had improved. While they were at the Gold Cup, they saw somebody else. And not only were they impressed, it feels like we're on the cusp of them potentially making an offer, and I think it's right. From essentially Camp Cupcake in January, Diego has certainly impressed. And I think, I think he's the type of player that Mauricio Pochettino likes because not only does he score goals, but that dude is aggressive in everything that he does, right? He plays for the badge, doesn't play for the name, plays hard. He's creative. He plays with flair, which is something that this team doesn't necessarily have. And this is also a bold move for him because he's not going to a top team in La Liga. He's, Celta Vigo is not a top team. They're maybe like a mid-tier, maybe a lower mid-tier type of team. They're not going to get relegated, but they're certainly not Atletico, and they're certainly not Real Betis, those type of teams, or Real Sociedad. They're not those type of teams. But they're a solid squad, right? And that would be a good move for Diego to make ahead of the World Cup because you're going into a league where you're going to be able to refine your tools, right? That's exactly that's everything that you want ahead of a World Cup season. Makes perfect sense. On the other side, Real Salt Lake is not the team that's going to hold back players. They have a track record. If a player wants to go and he expresses it, they let him go. And they retool just like they usually do. And that's a good move. And I think, with Diego, I think he's done everything that he could in Major League Soccer. And I like, what's another 100 matches in Major League Soccer going to accomplish that we already know about? right? The dude's just incredibly talented, and he's at the right age where he needs to make that jump. And again, the summer transfer window in Major League Soccer closes on August 21st. So we got about 2 weeks left, and I'm hoping something gets done because at the end of the day, I think Diego actually makes the World Cup roster. I really do. I think Diego is, at least for the backup 10 positions, right? And this is where I think that he has the upper edge on a dude like Gio Reyna. I don't think Gio Reyna, I hate to say it, I don't think he makes a move. He had the deal with Parma, and I think that stalled. And, I think he's sitting in a position where he might even be a little bit better positioned than Brendan Aronson, especially if he gets the move to La Liga. And he goes there and he competes, he gets minutes, he plays well, scores goals. I can't imagine that, Diego's going to get left off that roster. And I think that, again, from his standpoint, coming from where he's coming and having to prove and having to develop, from El Paso to Real Salt Lake, I mean, he's had to take the long way around. But every step of the way, he's gotten better. And now I think he's done enough where it's obvious that he's grown above U.S. soccer at this point, and now he needs to take a step up. And I hope that happens this summer because you want your best players in the in competitive leagues that match their skill level ahead of the World Cup. And if Diego can get that move, man, a position like the 10 that like even a year ago almost felt like a liability is now looking like a strength. So from that standpoint, I hope he does, because I think that when it comes to the lower half of the roster, yes, there will be guys from Major League Soccer playing specialist roles, but for when Pochettino's looking down the bench, looking at players that he can trust, and he's got a guy who applies his trade in La Liga, and he's just a solidified 10 who can come out and try to help chase a goal, man. Yeah, there's going to be room for days on that roster. But that's going to do it for me. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button again, because we are on a race to 1,000 subs. So very important. Also, a quick programming reminder tomorrow at 8 o'clock UK time. Harry Scarf from Scarfy Talk Spurs will be joining me on the American Hotspur. So that's going to be tomorrow at 8 o'clock UK time, 3 o'clock in the afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. So from that standpoint, man, I guess another great guest is going to be joining me on the American Hotspur as we recap today's loss to Bayern Munich. And we'll go over a few other notes as well, too. So I hope to see you there. I hope you guys have a good night, man. Take care.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies, tattered flags waving, dreams